All right, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the 2021 Campaign Finance and Candidate Training. This will be posted online at votebroomfield.com later today. We're going to start with next slide, please. Start with campaign signs first with code compliance. Compliance Manager Brandon Murray is here with us today. Then we'll get into watchers, 2021 calendar petitions, campaign finance, and reports and data on votebroomfield.com. Let's go ahead and welcome Brandon Murray. Please.
Okay, thank you. I'm Brandon Murray. I'm the Code Compliance Manager for the City and County of Broomfield. Part of any political campaign usually involves signs, and there are a few rules, some local codes that we do want you to be mindful of before you start going and putting your signs out around Broomfield. First of all, they are permitted. You can place your signs out. But they are subject to Broomfield Municipal Ordinance, specifically 17-44-050. This code is enforced by my department, the Code Compliance Division, that works on the police department. So for the signs, there is a size requirement for residential areas, so meaning any signs going up in residential areas, they cannot exceed 16 square feet per face, so per side. And they can't be 7 feet, or can't exceed 7 feet. If you have any signs in the business or industrial areas, they cannot exceed 32 square feet per face and cannot exceed 7 feet in height. Here seems to be the one we run into the most as far as location, where they are placed. Cannot be within, on, or over any public right-of-way or other public property. That's all right. So again, they cannot be within, on, or over any public right-of-way or public property. Now, it's not always easy to tell what's public and what's right away, but I'll give you a few tips here in a moment. And they cannot be within, on, or over private property without the consent of the owner. So it's okay as long as you get the consent of the property owner on private property. Okay, so right away, how do we define that? It terminates at the edge of a sidewalk, so furthest from street or curb. So on this little picture here, there's an X right in the tree lawn, that section of grass and trees between a curb and a sidewalk. That would be city right-of-way, and an area you cannot place your signs. If there's no sidewalk, then it terminates 4 feet from the outside edge of the concrete curb. So you just measure 4 feet from the edge of the curb, and anywhere beyond that, you are safe to place your sign. There's no curb, measure 6 feet from the edge of the pavement from a street. Public property also includes parks, open space, street medians, traffic control devices, utility poles, and the such. And again, these photos here do give some examples of what I'm talking about. Commonly, we see them in parks or along the edges of parks. Taped to street signs, telephone poles, things like that. Those are all prohibited locations. And then as far as removing the signs, the person or organization responsible for putting the sign up needs to remove it within 7 days after the election. I'm not sure if this pertains this go around. However, if the sign pertains to another election being held within 90 days, it can remain until 7 days after that election. But for the most part, 7 days after the election, your sign's got to be removed. As far as violations, my department goes around and we do patrol for these violations, and we also get complaints from the community. We will go look at these, and if they are in violation, meaning they're too large or they're in the wrong location, we will remove them. Political signs will hold for 7 days before we discard them. If you believe you've had a few of your signs removed and you would like them back, you are welcome to call at our number here, 303-464-5551, and inquire about the signs, and if we have them, we'll gladly return them to you. Lastly, we do not contact you automatically if we remove a sign. We just get too many of these and don't have the time to make calls. But like I said, you're welcome to call us and inquire. Other than that, that is the rundown there. If you have any questions, our contact information is here. You're welcome to reach out and inquire and ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, let's go ahead and fly right into watchers. Next slide, please. A watcher is an eligible voter who has been appointed to watch the election's activity. For this election, they will be appointed by a candidate or an issue committee. And to appoint the watcher, please use the standard oath of watchers form, which is posted on votebroomfield.com. The watcher will bring that form, the completed form, to us. Either the election manager or a supervisor judge will verify the form and will assist the watcher. Next slide, please. Watchers may witness and verify any step in the conduct of the election. That includes our public pretest, as well as our risk limiting audit and our canvass of elections. Watchers may report any problems or irregularities to the candidate or supervisor judge. They can challenge a voter's right to vote, and they can track who voted for Get Out the Vote's efforts. Just to note that tracking is something that used to be done very actively, but since we do post the daily records of who voted, most watchers choose not to track the voters who voted. Watchers may not personally interrupt the ballot processing, attempt to determine how any elector voted, or handle election materials, and a watcher may not take photo, audio, and or video recordings. This rule is becoming stronger this year. The Secretary of State at this point is proposing that we ban all cell phones and iPads and computers from watchers, but we will see how that turns out within the next 30 days. Next slide, please. We're going to hop right into the calendar. We are breezing through this presentation because we don't have anybody in person. So if anybody has any questions when they're watching this, feel free to call us at the election division. It's 303-464-5857. So in August, candidate petitions will be available on August 3rd. Candidates are not allowed to pursue signatures on their candidate petition before that date. The petitions are due back by August 23rd, and by August 26th, any cures that a candidate needs to be made to cure or replace the signatures that are discrepant would be by the 26th. So on Friday the 3rd, we will have our local ballot certified. Of course, Monday the 6th is Labor Day. This is September, sorry. Next slide, please. And then the 18th, which is 45 days before, what's actually 46 days before the election, we mail out military and overseas ballots, or we transmit them as well. And starting on the 20th, which is 43 days before the election, we'll have ballots available at the George DeCiro building for folks who are leaving town who want to pick up a ballot early. October, next slide, please. Again, we start mailing ballots to the general public on October 8th. That's 25 days before the election. Your first campaign finance report is due October 1st at 5 p.m. Write-in candidates, if we have a write-in candidate file, must file by the 13th of October. The 18th tabulation begins, and the second campaign report is due by 5 p.m. on the 29th. Next slide, November. Of course, the second is Election Day. For candidates who are not running this round but have an active campaign finance committee, annual reports are due on Monday, November 1st. A few dates for the election. End of ballot cure period is on November 10th. Risk limiting audit will be either Friday the 12th or Monday the 15th. Municipal canvass will be the 16th. And if we need a secondary canvass to canvass the rest of the elections, that will be on the 18th. Next slide, December. Your final campaign finance report for this year is due on December 2nd. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about petitions for ballot access. Again, we already mentioned that petitions, signatures cannot be gathered before August 3rd. And so that's when we will have the petitions available for candidates to pick them up. They're due by 5 p.m. August 23rd. Again, the cure period for discrepant or needed signatures is August 26th. And each candidate needs 25 valid signatures for to be compliant. Next slide. Circulators must be 18 years or over. Petition sections cannot be unstapled or tampered with. Each section must be notarized and no additional signatures after the notary signs. Petitions will be processed in the order they're returned in. So if you finish gathering all the signatures you need on, say, August 4th, you're welcome to turn them in. We can verify your candidacy much more quickly that way. Next slide, please. Signers. Each signer must be a registered elector in your ward, and they must be 18 years or older. The exception for that is for the mayoral candidates. They can be 18 and over and a registered elector anywhere in the city and county of Broomfield. They must provide current, correct registered voter address, including street name and number, and they may not sign more than one petition for the same office. So anyone may sign up to 2 petitions, one being a mayoral petition and one being a council member petition. They may not sign 2 mayoral petitions or 2 council member petitions, and we will count the signature as valid on the first petition which they sign. Okay, next slide. Let's dig right into campaign finance. On the slide are links to all 5 of the resources, printed resources that candidates and agents should be familiar with. Certainly Article 28 of the Colorado Constitution, Title I, Article 45 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, Colorado Campaign and Political Finance Rules, Colorado Campaign Finance Manual, and of course, Broomfield Campaign Finance Guide. Next slide. All reports go to the Broomfield Election Division, not the Secretary of State. The one exception to that for this election will be political parties. Political parties will continue to report their campaign donations to the Secretary of State. However, if candidates receive a donation from a political party, they file them with us. Broomfield follows state laws and Broomfield procedures. Candidates are treated as municipal candidates, and filings are public record and available at votebroomfield.com. Next slide. This is a flow chart to help you determine which committee you want to file, which type of report you want to file. Next slide. So a candidate without a committee can only have personal expenditures and in-kind donations. They must still file a personal expenditure and statement of non-receipt statements for each reporting period. And even a candidate who only made independent expenditures must still file a statement and report each deadline. There are no formal termination or required filings in subsequent years for a candidate without a committee. Next slide. So there's two types of committees. We have a candidate issue and a committee issue, a candidate committee and an issue committee. The issue committee information in the next few slides will be highlighted in blue. Candidate committees accept contributions and make expenditures to support a single candidate. It does not require additional members other than the candidate. An issue committee is 2 or more people who accept contributions and make expenditures in support of or opposing a ballot question. Next slide. So candidates committee must register as a committee before accepting their first contributions. They must complete the committee registration form and file it with the elections division. They must designate an agent or AKA a treasurer. This may be the candidate themselves and often is. And they must declare a bank account for the committee. Next slide, please. An issue committee, again, is 2 or more people or businesses or a combination thereof that support or oppose a ballot question or a recall. They must register within 10 calendar days after contributions and or expenditures exceed $200 to support or oppose any ballot question, or they have printed 200 or more petition sections. Issue committees must file all regular reports and no maximum limits on contributions or expenditures like a small-scale issue committee would have. Next slide. Speaking of small-scale issue committees, most of the same requirements, except the small-scale issue committee does not spend or receive more than $5,000 per election cycle. They must still register the committee, but they're not required to file disclosure reports as long as they don't exceed the $5,000 threshold. You can amend a committee. If you have a small-scale issue committee that becomes a regular issue committee, you would just amend the committee. You can also amend a committee by updating a bank name and or address or bank account number or contact or registered agent. Those changes must be made within 5 days of the change happening. Next slide. You may continue a committee, both candidate and or issue, if you do not use all your funds in one election cycle. You can use those funds for voter registration, political issue, education, post-secondary education scholarships, and reasonable and necessary expenses related to the duties of an elected official. You may, and oftentimes, next slide please, choose to terminate a committee after the election. You must continue filing disclosure reports until you terminate. So if you terminate your committee, you won't be required to file an annual reporting. And you may terminate your committee at any time by filing a simple termination report. The caveat is that you must have a $0 account balance in order to terminate. To use up any unused funds, you may donate your unused funds. A candidate committee may donate their unused funds to a political party, a new committee for the same candidate for a different office, or an IRS recognized charity or retained for future campaign. Issue committees may only donate to an IRS recognized charities. Or lastly, you may refund to your donors. Next slide. Here's your campaign finance reporting calendar. Again, October 12th is your first report with all transactions through October 7th. October 29th is the transactions October 8th through the 24th, and December 2nd is October 25th through November 27th. Reports are due by 5 p.m., no later than 5 days after the reporting period ends. Disclosure form reports are at the Elections Division website. We accept hard copy or electronic copies of the reports. The reports are available in Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel workbook. Once downloaded, please do not convert one of the formats into another. So if you're planning on using a Google Sheets worksheet, please download the Google Sheets format. If you're going to be using Excel, please download the Excel format. Once downloaded, again, do not convert them. Label and header fields are locked, and those are shown in yellow. I'm sorry, the fields in yellow are locked and contain formulas. The cover page is the committee and bank information, candidate and or agent and or both of their signatures, starting and ending balance, total contributions and total expenses. Continuing committees will roll their balances forward. One caveat is, on the cover page, we do need a hand-signed cover page by either the candidate or the agent, so please print and sign that, and then you can either scan it and mail it back to us or drop it off to us. Next slide. Best practices with campaign finances. Avoid anonymous contributions. Individually report every single contribution. For every contribution, list name, address, employer, and occupation. And it's best to avoid pass-the-hat contributions. Next slide. Itemized contribution. Although best practice is to itemize every single contribution, any contribution of $20 or more aggregate per period must include the donor's name and address. Any contribution one time of $100 or more must also include the employer and occupation of the donor. No cash donations over $100 are allowed. Contributions less than $20 may be itemized or listed as a lump sum, but not both. Okay? Big surprise, there are no contribution limits in Broomfield campaign finance. Itemized expenditures are very similar to your itemized deductions. Cash expenditures may not be over $100. Expenditures by third parties are controlled by committees, are reported by both the contribution to the donor and the expenditure by the committee. Expenditures less than $20 may be itemized or listed, but not both. Mileage is reported using the standard IRS rate, which currently, and we did look this up and verify, is 56 cents per mile for the year 2021. Candidate committees may not contribute to other candidate committees. I'll repeat that. Candidate committees cannot contribute to other candidate committees. Okay? Third-party expenditures that are not reimbursed are reported as in-kind expenditures. Next slide, please. Contributions are prohibited from corporations and labor organizations. That's candidate committees only. Foreign citizens or governments are prohibited. Other candidate committees cannot donate to your candidate committee. Lobbyists, when the General Assembly is in session. Anonymous donors of $20 or more. And LLCs, if the LLC includes members or owners of any of the above, so labor organizations or corporations. If you accept a donation from an LLC, you must be able to list all owners, and none may be a corporation. And Colorado Campaign and Political Finance Rule 1.4.2C on page 12 of the Campaign Finance Guide followed those recommendations. And of course, no cash contributions exceeding $100. Next slide. Loans. Loans are a little unusual in municipal candidate campaigns, but not unheard of. Loans must bear the usual customary interest rates. Loans must not be forgiven, may not be forgiven, and must have a due date unless the candidate themselves has lent their committee money. Loans may not be personal, or loans may be personal or from a financial institution, and a committee returns, if a committee returns an item to a vendor and receives a refund, the purchase amount is listed. Okay. Next slide. Donor returns. You may return an item to a donor, but it needs to be listed as a donation and as a return to the donor, or the donor. Again, reimbursements are considered an expenditure, not a returned contribution. On the form, though, there is a special tab for returned donations. Okay. Next slide. In-kind contributions. Report the fair market value of donated goods and services. Hours for unpaid voluntary services are not required to be reported. If a volunteer creates a thing of value, the reasonable value of that thing should be reported. A good example of this would be a graphic artist who's created logo and or website content. Some examples: the use of office space or event space is considered a contribution. Corporate-owned facilities may not donate space unless the facility normally donates space in the usual course of business. Next slide, please. Joint checking accounts. If you get a contribution from a joint checking account, the person who has signed the check is considered your donor. Reporting requirements apply to the individuals signing the check. You may not accept a donation in a couple's name. Major contributions report. Next slide. Thank you. Any single contribution of $1,000 or more received between October 6th and November 1st is a major contribution, and the candidate or committee must file a separate report within 24 hours of receipt of the donation. Next slide. So if you receive $1,000 before October 6th, you don't need to report that as a major contribution. You can just report that along with your other campaign finance report that's due during that period. I'm going the other way. Expenditures. I'm sorry. Cash and coin expenditures may not exceed $100 per transaction. When reporting the date of an expenditure, always use the earlier date associated with the transaction. You may reimburse staff or volunteers if they make purchases using their own money. Report reimbursements as expenditures, and include the individual reimbursed and also a description of the purchase and the vendor, please. Next slide. If you're hosting a fundraising event, the contribution is the ticket amount minus the value of the meal or amenity received to be reported as a contribution. So if you've had someone donate the food for an event, you list the food as an in-kind contribution. And if you have someone who are purchasing tickets to the event, the reported price is the ticket price less whatever the meal was. Candidate committees may share expenses if each pays its portion. If one committee pays for the entire purchase up front and the other committees reimburse within 30 days, it's not considered a contribution from one committee to another. And silent auctions are listed as in-kind donations. Paid for by statements. These statements are only required for independent expenditure and issue committees. If you have questions, please visit the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, using the link included in the slide. All complaints must be filed with the Broomfield Election Division and not with the Colorado Department of State. Complaint forms and process details are available at votebroomfield.com. Next slide. Late filings and penalties. By law, Broomfield imposes a fine of $50 per calendar day for each day a report is filed late. Broomfield imposes a fine of $50 per violation per calendar day for violations. Broomfield sends reminders, but the committee alone is responsible for the timely filings. Next slide, thank you. There are other kinds of committees that do not file in Broomfield. Again, political parties, political committees. There's a few others listed here that do not file with the City and County of Broomfield. Next slide. Political parties. Again, the Broomfield Democratic Party and Republican Party are organized as county political parties, and they report to the Colorado Department of State. Next slide. Political committees. A political committee is a group of two or more persons which support or opposes one candidate, and they make contributions or expenditures in excess of $200. Small donor committees is similar to a small issue committee, may only accept contributions from natural persons. Type of a political committee and individual contributions are limited to $50 annually. Federal PACs, political action committees, and 527 political organizations will all file, of course, with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. And the link is in that slide. Next slide. Independent expenditures. Independent expenditure committees, one or more person that receives or spends more than $1,000 in the aggregate to support a candidate. The committee is not associated with the candidate and is truly working independently. They must file with the Elections Division. Next slide. All right, reports and data. For campaigns and for political parties and for interest committees, we do publish campaign reports on votebroomfield.com. Click on reports and data, and you'll see all of the reports which we post. We post the voter registration list countywide by ward twice monthly. We post the mail ballot return daily after ballots are mailed. And we post the in-person voter list daily after the VSPC opens. The VSPC opens 8 days before Election Day for this election. Contact information is listed on the next slide. And that's all we have for this presentation. If you have any questions, we have a very capable staff. We have Pitty Norman, who is our operations coordinator. Daniel Millsap is our elections tech 2. And Lori Schacht and Molly Snyder are our election tech 1s. If you have any questions about the presentation, please do not hesitate to give us a call. Thank you very much.